Much like camera reviews, lens reviews online are pretty much useless. And I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to tell you what's wrong with them and what's missing and what we need. The aim of this video is to kind of open up some ideas to some of the information that's needed, and then I want to get more information from you of what you feel is missing too, so that I can start to produce some useful lens reviews. And this is why I think it's important. So you go and look at a lens, you want to buy a lens. Here's a lens. My first port of call would probably be a DxO score. Is it sharper than my other lens? What's the micro contrast like? Let's look at some shots of a £10 note and look at the corners, see how soft they get, how much vignetting happens, chromatic, all of this sort of stuff. And it is useful to a point. It's useful to a point. But what I didn't know when I bought this lens is that the colour coating increases the dynamic range in highlights to a certain point. I'd like to know the measurement of that because of the coating on it. I know it does it, I can see it does it, but I'd like to know how much more dynamic range am I getting and at what point does it blow out, because for certain shots it makes no odds whatsoever. Other shots, this lens is quite useful for that. Now the big thing for me is I do a lot of composite work where we're taking multiple shots and stitching them together. This is what's called an automatic lens. Now for most people, this is the kind of lens everybody uses. I've actually got a filter, ignore all the stuff I've taped onto it. It's an automatic lens. In that, I mean, you get your camera, you choose the aperture, and this fires, and the aperture does this. It does a little aperturing thing. The problem with that is, at f16, if you take 100 shots, they'll all be slightly different. Now for most people, if you're a wedding photographer, that doesn't matter. If you're shooting a series of shots and your exposure and depth of field is up and down by a third of a stop in either direction all over the place but never consistently, that's an issue. Can't do stop motion with this lens. That measurement is never recorded. And because of that, I use manual lenses, not manual in focus, or there is manual focus, but this lens here, you choose the aperture and it literally puts it into the physical location and it never moves. So that's that. But sometimes I'd like an automatic lens. It's more useful, it's more versatile, it's more efficient. So it'd be nice to know that. What I don't need to know is that there's colour fringing, because that's a click of a button to fix it, unless you're shooting film, or that it distorts slightly with a bit of pin cushioning or barrels, because that's a click of a button. It's not a deal breaker. It's important to know. I'm not saying we shouldn't know that information, but knowing that's more important. More so. I shot Canon cameras for years. Canon has a very warm red bias to the colour science. Sigma lenses have a green-purple bias. Very hard to find that information though. You don't know until you buy it, and not all Sigma lenses have that colour bias. This here on a Fuji camera is not as useful as it is on a Canon camera. For my personal taste, of course. For some people are like, yeah, that's awful on a Canon camera. You get rid of all the lovely Canon artifacts, as it were. But for me, it matters. Also, when talking about sharpness on a lens, this lens is too sharp once you go past f4. Too sharp. Yet it doesn't score higher than other lenses that aren't too sharp on a DxO score. And there's sharpness and there's sharpness, and there's different types of sharpness down to the lens build, and no one talks about that. They just go, this Sigma 35 art lens is too sharp. Anything past about 2.2, it's too sharp. However, where do we know that from? And it wasn't until I started shooting with it, I was like, great, this is pretty much a wide open lens for my style of work, even though all the data there says, because I already like this lens over here, that this one should be good. It doesn't work like that. Now, a lot of people talk about bokeh. Bokeh is a big subject of conversation. I think it's a pointless subject of conversation. It's interesting if you're in the niche of bokeh. I don't know what that niche actually does, but if you like bokeh, good for you. What people don't talk about, though, is focus fall off and the transition between the sharp part and the unsharp part. That, to me, matters more than bokeh. If it very suddenly blooms, that can be problematic, because that can cause this weird halo effect around the subject, which in post-production is very difficult to work with in masking. If the fall off is more gradual, it's much better. This here, my Acton 90mm lens, the fall off is very subtle and very controlled in focus. The Zeiss Milvus, almost as good. This here just goes to a fuzzy mess very quickly. And I know it's a physics in some way. It's like it's sharp here and then it falls out of focus. However, you can get 535mm lenses focused at the same point, and the way that it falls out of focus, the bit between sharp and not, that can differ wildly. And the implications as a professional photographer is actually one of the biggest things. It's one of the biggest issues. Sometimes we will focus stack to control the fall off of focus to apply it in a part of the image where it doesn't matter as much, because it can really mess up, especially in still life work, the sort of shot you're trying to take. And I know what you're thinking, Scott, you're ranting on something which only matters to you, but this matters to anybody going into professional photography. These are the sorts of things that image focus fall off. You don't know it's a problem until it's a problem, and then you have a real problem. Focus aperture breathing, focus aperture, that's not a word, is it? Aperture breathing, in terms of it going at a different aperture each time. You want to do any stop motion, you want to do any really critical composite work, it becomes an issue. It really does. And the movement of those aperture blades is really crucial, because not only is it the exposure that's going, it's also the depth of field, and it's also timed if using flash with the firing of the flash. It can create a whole flickering through an image. And again, other things which matter. The quality of the contact points on the back here. This is a Zeiss lens. The bayonet and everything else of it is built really well. Now, I don't know what the difference is between this bayonet and what Sigma put on the back of theirs, but on Sigma ones, these gold bits here break after years of use. This bit here wears down after years of use. This lens here has worked out far cheaper than the Sigma equivalent because it lasted longer. Weather sealing. When I was doing my documentary where everyone was talking about weather sealing, this lens here is weather sealed. It's a little rubber gasket on it, and that stops the weather getting in. Now you might think, Scott, you're shooting a studio, what do you need weather sealing for? We shoot food and splash photography. There is stuff being sprayed in here all the time. It might as well be a sandstorm half the time. And not just that, the amount of glycerin spray, that stuff gets everywhere and gets into everything. Weather sealing in a studio for a still life food drinks photographer, very important. But nobody quantifies it. Nobody says how weather sealed. The weather sealing on this lens here, nowhere near as good as a 24-105 Mark I from Canon. That one, you leave it in the rain. This one, not so much. But where do we know this information from? Now, at no point am I about to set up some huge website like DxOscore because I don't have the time nor inclination, but I would like to make some useful lens reviews. So what is it that you feel is missing in lens reviews that you've gone, I bought this lens and didn't know this would be a problem until it was, because I think that sort of thing matters. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.